Hi, this is Patricia Stepler with Your Inside Power. And this is where we learn how to use the gifts that we have been given on the inside of ourselves to change our outside and change our lives. Today, I have a very special guest with us. Her name is Krista Giannak. Hey, Krista, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so let me just tell you a little bit about Krista. Growing up, she always had stories ready, and she's very passionate about uncovering the untold stories that you might have and making a true impact for businesses and organizations and people. So she does blogs, bios, PR pitches to press release, and Krista customizes her content for the right audience. Her journalism background includes feature articles published in local newspapers, magazines, and a hospitality industry trade journal. She has garnered media coverage for her clients in local newspapers and on television stations such as CBS 2 and FIOS 1. What she's going to talk about today is her personal journey to become a blind skier that she uses to inspire audiences. So, Krista, a lot of people have excuses for why they can't do something. How can you relate that to being a blind skier?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that, Patty. I don't actually believe in excuses, in the sense that every fear, every doubt, all those feelings are valid. They are real feelings. They are not excuses. So to me, an excuse is, if I ever do use the word excuse, an excuse is actually when I give someone a fake reason, a reason that's not really the real reason I didn't do something. It's just an excuse. But our emotions are real. And they are valid. What I believe in is shifting from, wow, this is impossible. I can't do this. This is impossible, to shifting toward, maybe I can. And then shifting beyond by taking those small steps and finally being able to maybe take those giant leaps.
So when you talk about that fear being real, I know when I talk with some of my clients about fear, you can feel fear. Sometimes you're shaking, you're just scared to do something. I remember one time I was so scared I needed to go talk to somebody, and I kept driving down and past their business, and then I'd go back home. And then the next day I'd do the same thing. And I was just so afraid, and it was so silly, but that fear is real. So how did you overcome that? I mean, I can't imagine being on a ski slope with sight, let alone without sight. So how did you do that?
It started when my sensei told me all about the program in Vermont that was adaptive for people with disabilities. I was flabbergasted. What, really? I don't know if that's even possible. Blind people skiing? Yeah. So when people are amazed at the idea of blind skiing, I can relate, because I also didn't believe it was possible when I first found out about it. Or rather, before I found out about it, I didn't think it was possible. I had dreamed of it just because I always thought it might be fun to, woo, go down the hill, that kind of thing, and feel the sensation of freedom, of movement.
Okay, so you just said something that's really important. You had an idea that you'd like to do something, and skiing was part of that when you were younger. Is that what you're telling us?
It was just one of those passing dreams, like, that would be fun, but I don't think I can actually do it. And I just left it there.
So that's one of the things that I like to talk about with people. We don't get an idea in our head if it isn't something we can do. So that's just kind of amazing to me that you actually had that thought, because I've never really had that thought of going skiing. It's never been something I've ever wanted to actually try. I mean, I watch people ski, and And I think how dangerous it is and how scary it is. And I've never had the desire to go and ski. So
Mhm.
I don't feel like that thought's ever been put in my head. But obviously it was put in your head, even though you did not have the sight to do that. So I mean, that just shows us that if we're given an idea, there's a reason.
I don't know. I
So
mean, yeah, okay. I think we have I think the imagination is a wonderful thing. We can imagine all sorts of things that we can't do. And I think that's both part of the excitement and part of the problem, because we know that we have imaginations and we know that we can dream about things that aren't possible. At the same time, sometimes that knowing keeps us stuck in the idea that it isn't possible. So I didn't even attempt to look it up. Had I Googled it, I would have found it right away. I would have discovered that it was possible, but I didn't even bother, didn't even think about it. I mean, of course, there was no Google when I was a little kid, but even as I got older and maybe heard about people skiing, I could have Googled it. I didn't. The impossible, I like to call it, when we think something's impossible, find the impossible people. So the
oh, I love
impossible
that.
people they're not superheroes, even though they sound like them. Sounds like fun, right? I'd like to
Right.
be an impossible person. But what they actually are is people who are doing the things that we think are impossible.
So
And they
we're
found me in the sense that my martial arts sensei told me about this wonderful program in Vermont. I would not have known. I would not have thought to look it up. Maybe eventually I might have, but I didn't think of it. And that was the first step, was finding out that it wasn't impossible. The next step was actually talking to the director of the program and asking a million questions. I mean, keep in mind, this was all coming from fear and also curiosity at the same time. So the questions were of that variety. How does this work? Oh my gosh, is everybody gonna get hurt? Are we gonna come back in one piece? Do people get hurt all the time? How often do people get hurt? I mean, it was just, the theme was kind of around that.
so how did you overcome those fears? What did you do?
The director said, he explained how skiing worked, which I'll tell you some of that as I get into it. And he said to me, why don't you come up to Vermont and see for yourself? You can just come out on the snow with us, see if you like it. And you don't even have to ski if you don't want to, if you don't feel safe. So I'm like, oh, so I can take a step of going there, having fun with these folks. But if it's not for me, it's not for me. And that's okay. So that permission to have it be okay to fail, or even not to try, but to check it out, because I would always regret it if I didn't check it out. So
Okay.
that allowed me to move forward. That was my first step.
I was recently with a group of speakers. I'm in a group of people that are trained to be speakers. And we went to an obstacle course. And
Uh-huh.
it was the same type of thing. It wasn't so much, could you complete it? Could you get through the whole obstacle course without, falling? But it was, could you overcome your fear and realize that things are possible? And that, even if you could not finish, or you got stuck in a spot, you had accomplished so much. Is that the kind of way you felt when you were skiing?
That if I couldn't finish, well, I felt, yes, absolutely. When I started to ski, I mean, I hated the ski boots. Oh my gosh, they were so painful. And yet I heard people around me, the cheery voices, having fun. I will never forget. I heard the swoosh of the skiers going by. I felt the peppery snow on my face, and I learned to perceive the slope, the fall line under my feet. These are all sensations that I never really thought much about, even those that I've experienced. That I've never heard skiers going by. I felt snow before, but I never really gave it much thought. When I was out there on the ski slopes, though, it was all just kind of it was all part of the experience. And I knew that I wanted to experience more. I developed trust for the wonderful, warm, welcoming volunteers and ski guides. They were trained, they were experienced. There was a method to their madness so that they were able to literally, physically forge a path ahead for me as a blind skier to ski safely.
Wow, that is just so amazing. The people will, you know, help other people to experience something that, you know, maybe they have that physical part of them that they feel that they can't do it. You know, that's just awesome.
And
So
I was clumsy. I wasn't very good at balancing. And yet that didn't matter in the sense that I got better. And I learned they had a variety of different ways to help. They had poles. We had techniques of just learning to feel. A lot of it is just as you would learn to watch for certain things. I'm learning to feel and listen for certain things. I'm learning to listen for the directions, learning to feel what it feels like to be in that wedge, that ski wedge with your legs kind of apart in this certain way, and what it feels like to be in that special ski position where you're leaning forward into the skiing, even though it feels so counterintuitive and you think you're going to fall forward, but you don't.
So take us back to that first time you actually went down the hill. What did it feel like to you? You know, were you afraid of what you were sensing as you were going down the hill?
By the time they gave me that little push down that hill, I was already practicing some of the skills on flat ground. I was already practicing gliding, practicing the position of the skis. And yeah, it was scary. And at the same time, it was exciting. I mean, I was gliding, I was doing it, I was skiing, and then I was falling.
Okay,
and then I was getting back up again.
So even though you fell, like, what was the feeling that you had at that accomplishment?
I had a mix of different feelings. I couldn't tell you exactly when I had what feeling, but I could just tell you it was a mix of frustration, of being proud of myself, of enjoying new sensations, just kind of curiosity and learning. And it was just all of that jumbled up together is my memory of skiing. And it was enough for me to come back year after year after year. I came back for a number of years. The last time I went downhill skiing was a couple of years ago, because of course we had the pandemic and other things going on. And I've also done cross country skiing as well as water skiing.
Oh my goodness.
Because like once I tried one, I was like, oh, I've got to try.
There's another thing I've had no desire to ever do. It's water skiing. I guess I am not as brave as you are, Krista.
Well, you know what's interesting about the whole blind skiing angle and me as a writer for my business, Wise Words That Matter, it's the fact that I am, just as I learned to ski, and that was a fear that I faced, I realized that I faced a lot of fears and challenges in my life, one of which is directly related to my business, the fear of sharing my story. I shied away from my story, and now I speak about it on podcasts.
So what caused you to shy away from your story?
Well, let's face it, I'll be honest. I was angry. I was angry because I kept having to answer the same old tired questions about blindness. Even though on the one hand, I was glad that people felt comfortable to ask, and I was glad that I could educate people, the anger came from, I didn't want to be the representative of blind people. I didn't want to be the billboard. I just wanted to be Krista Giannak, the writer, the creative, the person who makes mistakes, or the person who helps others see things differently.
You know, I can imagine that a lot of people go through that time when they feel like they've got an imperfection in them that does make them angry. So how did you overcome that? I can understand how you would feel angry.
Yeah, and underneath that anger was sadness, because I wish more people knew about disability so that we wouldn't have to ask the first blind person, the first deaf person, the first amputee that we ever met all the questions, because we would already know the answers. It would just be part of the normal everyday life of everyone, that disability would just be typical, in the sense of that we would see people actively out in the community more often, and we would not shy away. We would just talk to them like everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And that, so that, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, my son went through that, being a diabetic and having insulin, and, having to make those adjustments while I was an athlete, and, why do you have to do this? And, question after question. So I understand that. And I know, even though he handled it well, like I feel like you do, there was anger at times, like, why me?
Yeah. And for me, it's not about any, I wasn't angry at anyone. I wasn't angry that people had questions. I just was frustrated at the idea of being the representative. And I felt like it took away from me as a person. So enter the blind skiing story. Suddenly that actually is about me as a person. It's about my overcoming fears and challenges and strengths and telling the story from a strengths-based perspective. I mean, there's a saying talking about we share our scars, not our wounds. I don't know who said that, but it resonated with me. The idea that, sure, we can share about our vulnerabilities, especially when we're trying to advocate for change or relate to people going through a similar struggle, things like that. At the same time, when we're public facing and we're boosting people's trust and boosting our own credibility, we want to share what we've accomplished, how we got here, and how we're now in a position to help other people.
So Krista, how has this experience with overcoming that fear and realizing that you could go skiing, I imagine that's impacted you in other areas of your life?
Well, the main thing I would say is that it has changed my story. It's changed the way that I think about blindness. It's changed the way that I feel about being able to talk about it and share it with the world. I am much more excited about being able to share that personal story now, because it's told from a different perspective. Instead of the perspective of instead of the doubting perspective, like, oh, people have such low expectations, or, oh, I hope people understand, or this kind of, please, please, please kind of feeling when you talk, when you answer the same questions over and over again, instead of kind of, oh, this again, oh, this is boring. It allowed me to look at things and remember the wonder, because as a blind person, and even as a sighted person in your case, we all learned skills that were originally amazing to us when we found out that they could be done, or they seemed very difficult or impossible even to us. Like, how does anybody do that? Or, the wonderful world of technology. How does this work? Holy cow. So when something seems boring, when somebody asks a question and it's like, oh, I'm describing this again, I now think about and remember the wonder that I felt when I learned about it, even if I have to go back pretty far. Like when we're talking about talking computers, I have to go back to being a little kid. But when I put myself in that framework, it changes everything.
So I know Thomas Edison said, if we did all the things we were capable of doing, we would literally astonish ourselves. Yeah, and I imagine that skiing for you was probably astonishing. And you definitely take other people's excuses away. You really do, because, look at how far you've come and how your experiences and the things that you can do that maybe somebody that was blind maybe 100 years ago would not have even thought about doing.
An excuse is just a fake reason for not doing something that you want to do. So I
like
can't
that.
take those fake reasons away. What I can do is inspire you to share the truth and to face the truth of what it is. If you're afraid, maybe facing that fear, and maybe that can eventually become part of your story as you decide to do what it is that you want to do. Or if you don't want to do it, if you actually don't want to face the fear, maybe that's part of the story too, because there are fears that we don't all want to face, as you pointed out.
Yeah.
Not every fear or challenge needs to be faced and overcome. Part of the story is the choice that we make, that we consciously make about the challenges that we're going to go after. And when we do have obstacles along the way and things like that, it's about the little choices, many choices that we make to enjoy the journey or to talk to others who can help us. I mean, that I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have those guides that I was talking about. And even just in life and in business, the people who mentored me, the people who supported me. And when I struggle now about doing things and, oh, what am I going to do next? I don't know if I'm doing a giveaway for the first time. Oh, crap. There's lots to learn, that kind of thing. I talk to others and ask, and I try to keep in mind that everything is a learning process. And sometimes we just have to do it imperfect, because it's better than not doing it.
When I know when you talk about taking the little steps, when I first started my business, some of the technology just was so overwhelming to me. And sometimes I was just about in tears because I could not figure it out. And now I'm to the point where, I've done one thing, I can do another. And I think sometimes when we face our fears and we keep plowing through and we don't give up, that then we realize, we might still be afraid of doing that next thing, but we go with that knowing that we had accomplished something prior to that.
Absolutely. I mean, starting my business was like that for me. I needed, when the phone wasn't ringing, when I was going for interviews after a couple of jobs I was working at a nonprofit that's where my position was eliminated, and I was working with local newspapers that got bought out.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I needed to build myself up because the job search process was tearing me down. The rejection, the sort of need to check off boxes. And
so Krista, go ahead.
Yeah. When people would say, oh, do you know HTML? Oh, do you know graphic design? Oh, do you do this specific type of writing that I've never done in my life?
Yes.
I needed to realize and to discover and to find my strength, my confidence, and work on that instead of trying to pretend or trying to downplay, like, oh yeah, well, I can learn that. Instead of doing that, I needed to build up my portfolio, and to, even if I wasn't making a lot of money initially, I needed to find clients of my own.
Krista, why don't you just tell our audience what kind of things that you actually do for people? Because there might be somebody out there that could utilize your services.
Well, I was mentioning how I inspired people to share their own stories. And I love that because I get to help someone, encourage them to be just a little bit more vulnerable, to build trust with their clients, to show their journey. And then I get to write about it. Because from blogs to bios, ebooks to e-courses, there are stories and there's wisdom and there's knowledge that needs to be shared.
Do you think that a lot of people kind of sell themselves short? Like their
I
story
do,
is
because
important?
I've done it.
Me too.
And I think I still do it sometimes. And I look at all of that, and I look at things, I think deeply. I ask the deeper questions to discover, who are you? Why do you matter? And who cares? Not in the derogatory sense, in the sense of who in your community is going to be most interested in what you have to offer. So that, I mean, journalism is all about angles, right? And
Right.
so I look at my work as finding new angles on sometimes old things, sometimes old topics, old traditional ways of doing business.
You know,
I'm always looking for the innovation in my clients. I'm always looking for the passion. I'm always looking for what's just a little bit different. Or maybe sometimes it's just, how can we market this a little bit differently than your competitors are already doing it? And that's where my writing comes in, the content that I write for clients.
Nene, I often say that we all have a book inside of us. You know, we all have stories. And I know my uncle's trying to put his memoirs together for his kids and his grandkids. And, you know, just reading those stories are just, I mean, he could put a book together for the public of what it was like to live back during World War II, you know, as a kid. And, you know, it's just all kinds of things that we have inside of us that we really could get across to others. So we just have a couple minutes left, and I know you like to share with others some things that you might have that could benefit them. So you want to just share some things that are coming up in your life and ways people
Absolutely.
might be able to reach out to you.
All right. Well, you can always reach out to me, wisewordsthatmatter.com, links to all my social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, and it also links to the 7 budget eating, marketing, and PR mistakes to avoid. That's the free report that's up there currently. I will also be speaking, if you want to hear more about embracing your story, then attend the Accelerate Your New Summit. I'll be speaking on Monday, the 18th. And the recording will be up there for a while if you're hearing that if you're hearing this after. You can go to accelerateyournew.com. That's accelerateyournew.com, because I mean, what's new in your world? And there's a speaker on there who can help you accelerate that new.
And so what exactly are you going to be speaking on at that summit? What's your topic?
My topic is hidden stories, lessons from a blind skier and writer.
Okay.
And then there's a backstage talk as well for VIP folks, where I'll be going more in depth. Your stories, your strength.
And so are you going to help people to learn how to write their stories so they can maybe make their business grow more? Or
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I'm going to be talking about, well, first of all, we're going to be talking about how to actually tell your story. So it'll be applicable whether you want to write it, whether you want to hire someone to write it, whether you don't want to write it at all and you just want to speak about it. The elements are still the same, and we'll do some interactive exercises to get those elements into your head.
Okay.
So the idea is that if you walk away with something that's just a little different than what you've been saying before, what you've been telling before, a little more powerful, a little more impactful, then you've had a good session.
Okay. So I'm sure that if somebody wants you to help them write their story, that you're available to do that too, right?
Absolutely. Blogs, bios, ghostwritten ebooks and e-courses. That type of content is my bread and butter. I also write content for websites, because where the story has the most impact, on that about page, when people look you up and say, who is this person? Why should I trust them? They want to read that. And if you're a speaker, they listen to that short bio and say, oh, that's why this person is worthy of standing in front of us today, or that's why this person is worthy of getting booked as a speaker.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you, Krista, for being here today. and for helping us at Your Inside Power. And again, if any of you want to reach out to her, go to her website, which is wisewords.matter.com, and also look for her. This is in April of 2022 at the summit that's called Accelerate Your New.
Yeah, and
accelerateyournew.com.
And you'll be able to sign up even after the summit is over. And you'll be able to, it'll show you how to get the recordings.
Okay. All right. Well, thank
But
you, Krista.
It's free and live right now, though. So if you are hearing this, absolutely sign up.
Okay. It's been a pleasure to be with you here today. Thank you.
Thank you.